5, 6, 7, 8.
Welcome to the EX Podcast, where I talk with business leaders, authors, and disruptors on how the workplace is changing. This podcast brings a different lens to the conversation around HR transformation, company culture, and employee engagement. It offers a brand and customer experience perspective rather than a traditional HR perspective. Why? Because companies have to think of themselves as employment brands if they hope to attract and retain talent. It is time we put people first to rehumanize the workplace. Simply because leaders who don't care about the employees will eventually be surrounded by people who don't care about their business. Today's guest is Jeff Gothelf, an award-winning author and UX specialist. Today with Jeff, we talk about why humility is important to business management and why most organizations lack it. How to build a customer-centric, product-led organization. Why building a culture of learning is important. Why we need to change current management tools that were built for a different pace of operation. How to shift from output to outcomes. The real reason employees hate their job and how leaders can turn it around in 30 days. Why micromanaging will never drive agility and what to do instead. And if you don't do this one thing in your organization, you will eventually fail. Support for this podcast is brought to you by Life Guides. Responding to the inevitable and unexpected life challenges of your employees is one of the most profound opportunities to express your level of care, empathy, and compassion to the well-being of your people. The Life Guides Network partners with organizations who recognize this profound opportunity and provides them with a platform to match the employees who are going through a specific life challenge with trained guides who have successfully navigated the same life challenge. Life Guides is a peer-to-peer network that exists to unlock and share the largest untapped and valuable resource on the planet, human wisdom and experience. Find out more at www.lifeguides.com. I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Jeff. Because it takes a good amount of time to produce this podcast, please make sure to review the podcast on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, TuneIn, or YouTube, as it will help promote the content. If you want me to speak at your next event, get some advice on your EX initiatives, or send me feedback, suggestions for future topics or guests, you can reach me at svincent@exsummit.com or on Twitter at @EX_summit. All right, let's get to it. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the EX Podcast. Very excited for today's guest, Jeff Gothelf. Jeff is calling from my favorite city in the world, Barcelona in Spain. He is an award-winning author and a UX specialist. Jeff, thanks for joining us today.
My pleasure, Stefan. It's really great to be here.
Tell us a bit more about who you are and what you do.
Sure. So today I work as a coach, trainer, keynote speaker, and consultant with mid and large-sized organizations. And I help them do two things. I work with the product teams to help them improve the products that they're building and the processes they use to build products. And I work with the leaders of those organizations to help them build the kind of culture that supports the building of great products. I teach a lot of workshops. I do sort of coaching, retainer engagements with a variety of leaders and product teams. And I give a lot of talks at conferences, at in-house events, meetups, webinars, that kind of thing. I've written a couple of books together with Josh Seiden, one called Lean UX and another book called Sense and Respond. And then the most recent book that I've published was a small short book called Lean versus Agile versus Design Thinking, which was the first book to launch Sense and Respond Press which is a business book publishing press that Josh Seiden and I run as a side hustle at the moment.
What decided you to focus both on UX design, product developments, and culture?
I started off as a UX designer, and I worked for a decade as a designer trying to design great products. And 10 years into my career, I found myself in the leadership position of a small design team in New York. And together with that team and some other folks, we were able to bridge the gap between agile and user experience design. And that's the material that ended up in the Lean UX book. Now, what's been fascinating is that since then, people stopped asking me to design software, and they started asking me to teach the material that's in the Lean UX book, which is, again, kind of why I'm doing what I'm doing today. And the overwhelming feedback over the years has been, we want to work this way. We want the way that we describe in Lean UX, teams, first of all, they already know it. Second of all, they buy into it. And third, they want to work this way, but their boss won't let them work this way. It's not the way the company operates. It's not the way the company thinks. They're not customer-centric. They're not collaborative. They're not cross-functional. And they're certainly not agile. And so this became clear to myself, to Josh Seiden, that there was a bigger conversation here. It wasn't just the tactical, how do product teams make good products every day, but it's also how do we create the kind of environment that supports that way of working? Because if the teams are trying to work one way and the organization is asking them to do something differently, it's going to break. And so the culture conversation grew out of the tactical Lean UX conversation.
That makes sense, totally. If humility is so important to business management, why do most organizations lack it?
It's a great question. I think humility is misunderstood to some extent, and then I also think that humility isn't rewarded. So let me tell you what I mean. So first of all, let's define humility, okay? Being humble is not the abdication of leadership. It's not the abdication of vision. It's not the abdication of authority. Being humble simply means that I have a strong opinion because of my experience and my expertise and my position in the company. But in the face of evidence, I'm willing to change course. If you've ever heard the phrase that I learned from Janice Frazier out in San Francisco, strong opinions loosely held, that's what humility means to me. And so first of all, I think it's misunderstood. I think people think that being humble means you don't have an opinion, that you don't lead, that you don't provide vision or direction, and that's just wrong. You do, but you change your mind in the face of evidence. So that's one issue. The second is that it's not rewarded. In other words, most leaders in large and mid-sized organizations get rewarded for doing the thing they committed to during budgeting season, right? So we're coming up on budgeting season now. It's August, right? September, October, November. That's budgeting season for next year. Most managers, leaders, executives will say, I need this budget. Here's what I'll do with the budget. And here's the return on the investment that I expect. And so along the way, so what they've currently done is now they've predicted the future for a year because, we can all do that. And when they learn things that disagree or disprove what they'd committed to, they ignore that because they committed to doing these things by these dates with these results. And so we don't reward that agility, that course correction, that humility drives. And so to me, those are at least two reasons why that is an issue in most organizations.
How do you build a customer-centric, product-led organization? It's a very different mindset from a traditional organization, and it requires maybe some specific skill sets, different mindsets as well. How do you build that customer-centric, product-led organization?
Yeah, it's well, I mean, first and foremost, you have to put the customer at the center of everything that you're doing. So what does that mean? That's generic, and you've heard Jeff Bezos say that. And what does that mean? Well, it means a couple of things. It means, firstly, deeply understanding your customer, making the effort, spending the time, spending the money to deeply understand your customer, what they're trying to achieve, what's getting in their way, what are going to be their ongoing needs forever, and what are going to be the needs that are going to change from time to time. And this is not a one-time activity. This is a continuous learning activity that most organizations do not invest in, because learning activities take people away from delivery activities. And we still, because we come from 100 years of manufacturing management as the model for how to run big companies, we still see time away from delivery as an inefficiency or as a distraction. But that's part of it. So that's the first thing. The first thing is we put the customer at the center. We deeply, deeply empathize and understand the customer continuously on an ongoing basis. The second thing that has to happen is that we have to change our measures of success. Again, we're driven by 100 years of manufacturing as the model for how to manage companies. In manufacturing, you get rewarded for making the thing, right? So let's say you're manufacturing cars, right? You get rewarded for making a car, 100 cars, 1,000 cars efficiently, on time, on budget, etc. The value is placed in the production of the product. Now, if you put the customer first, we've got to change the measure of success. And the measure of success has to change to, we made the customer successful. So what does that mean? That means that the customer's behavior changed to reflect a better experience, a better product, a better workflow, a better value, whatever it is. And so all of a sudden, the features that we build are transient. They're non-events. They're not the important part of the experience, the important of the management, of the development of the service of the product. The important part is the change in customer behavior, and hopefully it changed for the better. We call those outcomes. We call the production of stuff, features, devices, etc. We call that output. And to build that customer-centric organization, we have to focus on outcomes more so than outputs.
Now, it might be easier to implement when it's an early stage company, but when it's a much mature company and bigger company, how do you change that mindset?
It's really difficult. There's no silver bullet, and it's really tough. And again, let me. So we're talking about culture. The more we peel back this onion, the bigger the challenge gets. And so if you want to change mindset, I think you've got to do at least two things. First, you've got to get people to do the new thing. People will not change their mind if you just kind of try to convince them, no, I swear it's a better way of working. You really should try it. Oh, yeah, I'll definitely try it. No one ever tries it. Right? We've got to get people to actually do it, and whether that's forcing them or creating a situation where they feel safe doing it, whatever it is, but we've got to get them to actually try it. Once they try it, if they can actually see for themselves that it's a better way of working, mindsets start to shift. So that's one thing. We've got to create the kind of safe sandboxes, experiments, pilot efforts that allow those kinds of process experiments basically to happen, for people to experience a new way of working. That's number one. Now, if we can get that to happen, and we get people to actually believe that this is a better way, we're shifting their mindset, we've got to change the incentives for them. That's the key, right? Because, and this is something that I run into all the time. I was working with a big bank in the U.S. for 3 years, variety of different engagements, everything from executive level coaching to product team training and development and coaching and all kinds of things in the end. And this bank, like all the banks in the U.S., has poured millions and millions of dollars and efforts into digital transformation and agility. And they forgot one thing, which was compensation. and performance management. So the teams are in squads, tribes, guilds, release trains, whatever it is, right? Whatever we call it today. They're working in sprints. They're short cycles. They're iterating and all that good stuff. But the organization is rewarding them for delivering specific scope by specific date, right? Waterfall. That's what they're getting paid to do. They're being asked to work in the new way, and they're being paid to work in the old way. And it breaks the system. And so compensation and performance management, and I told you peel back this onion, it gets really big. And that's a massive minefield, right? Think about this, right? Put yourself in the position, like let's say you work in a large company, whatever it is, banking, insurance, retail, it doesn't matter, right? You've been there 15, 20 years. And you've got your eyes set on a particular promotion, a position, an office in the building, whatever it is. And now the organization is agile, and the success criteria have been changed. In other words, we moved the goal, right? You were 10 meters from the goal, and we moved it. Now, you multiply that times 20, 30, 40, 50,000 employees in a company. Yeah. That's a nightmare. Right, so it's no wonder organizations avoid this, but that's what needs to happen.
We talked about the importance of learning about your customers, but beyond that, why is building a culture of learning important?
So this is where humility comes from, right? This is literally where the source of humility is learning, right? We have to make mistakes to find out better ways of doing things. So if we build a culture of learning, and by learning I mean we don't treat the work as a requirement, we treat the work as an assumption or a hypothesis, and then we learn whether the hypothesis is true or false. If the hypothesis is true, terrific, well done. But if the hypothesis is false, you've got to change course, right? You have got to come back in front of your team, your boss's boss, the steering committee, whatever it is, and say, look, I was wrong. But it only took me 3 days to find out that I was wrong, and I learned a better way of doing it, and I'm going to try that. And so all of a sudden we are injecting humility into a culture to where it didn't exist before.
Are current management tools built for a different pace of operation?
So absolutely, right? So this is what we're talking about, right? So we think about performance management and compensation. They're designed for a different world, a production world. And we build systems now. Even look, everything's got software in it, right? So think about Tesla. Right? A Tesla is a system. It's a physical product that has a computer at the heart and the brain of it, and that system updates continuously. You wake up in the morning and your car can do new things because the software updated. So performance management and compensation has to change. The timelines that we worked in. So we talked about budgeting season. Budgeting season is usually for a year. And oftentimes executives get asked to build 3 to 5 year plans as if they can tell the future that far out. Look, a year in today's world is an eternity. And for you to be able to say, on December 15th, 2020, we will have sold X many components, we will have this many customers, we'll be making this much money, and this is how we'll be making that money, is a lie. I'm just going to say it, right? It's a fabrication. It's a guess. At best, it's a guess. And inevitably, it's going to be wrong. How we get there, where we get, what happens. And so how do we take the budgeting cycle and reduce it in frames, right? In time frames. Instead of working with 12-month time frames, why don't we work with 3-month time frames? And then adjust course every 3 months. So absolutely, all of these management tools are designed for a different world, and we need to start to evolve them to our continuous software-driven world.
This leads to the next question. We talked about shifting mindsets from making stuff to focusing on outcomes, which requires a change in behaviors. So how do you go from the intent to the execution, and what are the critical steps that leaders and organizations should follow to change that mindset from output to outcomes?
So I think this is where a deep understanding of your customer comes into play. The most powerful thing that you can do to convince people to shift from output to outcome is to show them customers and users using their products and services in the real world. Show them where they struggle. Show them where they drop off. Show them where they can't complete the tasks. Show the frustration. Because inevitably, somebody thought that feature, that workflow, that experience was a great idea. It turns out it wasn't. And the more that people can see that, and to be clear, not get fired for it, right? Then we can start to make that shift, because all of a sudden we shipped it, but it didn't work. But we spent a year on it. Yeah, but it still didn't work. Well, we've got a year's worth of work planned. Maybe we should find out sooner if it doesn't work, right? So that conversation starts to happen when people start to see the broken things that they've put in front of customers, and it's inevitable that people put broken things in front of customers because, again, we're taking a guess. We're making it our best assumptions about how to solve a business problem for these folks, or a customer problem.
What is the real reason, in your opinion, why employees hate their jobs, and how leaders can turn it around?
Look, I think people hate their jobs because in most organizations, we have hired smart people and we get in their way. So you hear that a lot. You hear a lot of kind of successful leaders say, hire smart people and get out of their way. I think that in most organizations, that's not true. I think that in most organizations, people are micromanaged and are expected to do what they're told. And that's limiting their contribution to the organization. I think the more that people are, I've seen this firsthand, I'll be honest with you. I've led, and I've consulted with teams that had autonomy. They had a vision given to them. They had a strategy given to them. They had an outcome provided for them as the measure of success, but it was their job to solve that business problem and make the customer successful. And when they were working on their own ideas, they were so passionate and so motivated. They would come in early. They would do extra work. They would watch out for each other. The collaboration, the support, the safety. There was no. It wasn't perfect. There were always issues, right? But there was none of that animosity where in a micromanaged, output-focused world where say, well, look, I did my part and I gave it to you, and the fact that you screwed it up, well, that's your problem, right? That's not my fault. Like, that stuff doesn't happen when we start to build these customer-centric, outcome-based organizations. And so that's why I think people hate their jobs. If we give them an opportunity to do the thing that they're good at to their fullest potential, they're 10 times more passionate about work.
So you talked about the micromanaging and that it doesn't drive agility. So beyond getting out of the way, what are the things that leaders need to do to get people motivated and empowered to experiment and take risks?
Yep. So I want to be clear. This is a two-way street here. We like to point at the managers and say the managers are screwing us up, right? You hear all these terms about middle managers, the frozen middle, right? Right. I don't know if you've heard that term, right? So executives get it, the teams get it, but the middle management layer will not move, right? And look, it's easy to pick on leadership. My boss won't let me do it, right? That's easy. I want to be clear. This is a two-way street. So micromanaging has been the way forever, okay? If we want people to change that way of working, then look, first and foremost, we have to change the way that we frame work for the team, right? So instead of saying, build me an iPhone app, we're saying we want you to increase mobile commerce by 15%, right? Because that's going from output to outcome. So we're not telling the team what to do, we're telling them what the goal is. Okay, that's number one. So that's super helpful as just a starting point. Now, if you're a manager and you're used to micromanaging and you just told the team to increase mobile commerce by 15% and you don't know what they're working on, and frankly, they don't know what they're going to work on, right? You're going to be very, very nervous because at some point your boss is going to come and tap you on your shoulder and say, hey, what's your team working on? And the answer, I don't know. That's not a good answer. And so this is where the two-way street comes in. If you get your leader to framework for you as a problem to solve with a clear outcome as a measure of success, as members of that team, it is your responsibility to proactively communicate to that leader and to other leaders, and to be as transparent as absolutely possible about what you're doing, especially in the early days of trying to change the culture. The more transparent, the more proactive you are, the more your boss and your boss's boss knows what you're doing. The more they know what you're doing, the calmer they are, and the less in your face they will be. And so that when someone comes and asks them what you're up to, they can say, oh, well, they tried this thing and it didn't quite work, but they learned these 5 things. And based on that, they're pivoting to this, to kind of option B here. And they should have a version of that ready to go on Tuesday. Right? So that's the key here. The bosses have to change how they frame the work and how they measure success. The teams have to then be extremely transparent, radically transparent is the phrase I use all the time, and over-communicate up and out so that everybody knows what you're doing and why.
There are a lot of changes going on right now in the workforce and the way organizations work. Whether they hire gig workers, they work with agencies with very specific skill sets, they work more cross-functionally. The old ways of micromanaging a team are gone, and leaders have to adapt to be able to be more agile in that management of different contributors. So what would be your advice for organizations that are embracing that new concept, and what are the changes they would have to do among their managers so that they can successfully navigate through this new type of work?
Yeah, great. So I have 2 answers to this. First of all, try to build as consistent a team as you can for as long as you can. So first of all, try to avoid outsourcing anything as much as you can. As soon as you outsource stuff, you start to break the flow, you break the shared understanding, you break the agility of the team. So the more that you can do with one team, the same team for as long as possible. Now that could be a team of contractors and full-time people or whatever, but people dedicated to the initiative for the longest period of time, that would be the ideal situation. But there's another aspect here, too, which I think you're hinting at. And it's something that we've started teaching recently, and it's about leading cross-functional teams. Leading cross-functional teams is difficult. Right? If you're an engineering manager, and everybody that reports to you is an engineer, you've done the work, you know the process, you know the challenges, you know the career path, you know all that stuff. You can very competently speak to any employee about any of those things. Mm-hmm. But if you're an engineering manager and now you manage a team of product managers, designers, engineers, maybe QA, marketers, who knows what else, right? Business analysts, you've not done all that work. You don't know what their work is. And so there's a real opportunity here for people to improve their skill sets, to reach out to the disciplines that they don't know. Say, look, Stefan, I'm an engineering manager and you're a designer. I don't know much about how designers work. Can we go have lunch? Can you kind of tell me your process? Right? I think there's a real, and again, what are we doing here? We're putting, in this particular case, the human, it's not the customer necessarily, but it's the human in the center, and we're creating empathy for that human. We're interviewing that human. We are understanding what challenges they have and what they need to be successful. And then as a leader, it's your job to provide that and then measure that individual's success based on the behavior change that you'd like to see in them now that you understand how they're supposed to work. And so I think there's a real opportunity for managers here to expand their managerial toolkit to be leaders of cross-functional teams. And again, it requires everything that we've talked about today: humility, empathy, and shared understanding.
If you don't do this one thing in an organization, you will eventually fail. What is that one thing?
Talk to your customers. That's easy.
That's easy and not easy at the same time.
Right, exactly.
What are some of the ways to really talk to customers and learn from them?
I mean, look, there's an infinite number of ways. And this is the thing that I think people don't understand when they resist talking to customers. They say things like, it's expensive, we have to rent a facility and invite all these people and take 2 days off of work. You could do it that way. There's nothing stopping you, and there are facilities that do that, but you do not have to. There are so many inbound channels of customer feedback. I mean, the call center, let's start there. That's the customers call you every day. That's a channel. Sales teams talk to customers every day. That's a channel. Feedback forms on your website, that's a channel. Forums where people discuss products and services that you sell, that's a channel. If you have any kind of situation where your customers are interacting with you in real life, go there and watch them. You don't even have to talk to them. Just watch them buy something in your store, right? Or navigate your car dealership or whatever it is. And then talking to them. And again, you don't need to talk to 20 of them. You need to talk to 3, 4, 5, 6 people before you start to get a sense of the patterns. And then you iterate the process or the experience for them. And then you interview the next 4, 5, 6 people. So there's an infinite number of ways to do this.
So let me ask you some fun questions before we wrap up our conversation today. The first thing is obviously, when we were talking offline, before our conversation, you asked me where I was from because my accent was clearly not from Indiana. So you're calling from Spain, but clearly you don't have a Spanish accent either. Where are you from, and how did you end up in Barcelona?
Sure. So I grew up in New Jersey, in the U.S., and I always wanted to live in Europe. I travel extensively for work, and my wife agreed. She wanted to move to Europe as well. We couldn't decide where to go. I like warm, sunny, beach kind of climates. And her family lineage, if you trace it back a few hundred years, is from Scotland and England. So she likes cold, gray, lots of moss on things, lots of green. And so clearly we have different points of view about kind of the ideal place. And, and then we have kids and all that kind of stuff. So we did exactly what I teach my teams to do. We ran experiments. Because my job is such that I can work from anywhere, we took a month off every summer for 4 years with the kids, and we went and we lived in a country that we thought we might like. Now, look, it was summer, there wasn't school, there was very little work, but we got an Airbnb and we lived in a neighborhood and we did laundry and we went to the grocery store and all of those things. And we, over the course of 4 years, we visited 5 cities. So the first year we split it up between Australia and New Zealand, Sydney and Auckland, so not Europe, but we visited there. We did London, we did Barcelona, and we did Utrecht in the Netherlands. Mm-hmm. Just outside of Amsterdam, and Barcelona was the winner. I had been coming here for a few years for various reasons, and I was a big fan. But Barcelona was the winner, and we decided to do it. Which is, look, you can only de-risk an idea so far, and at a certain point, you kind of have to do it. And the kids were into it, and we've been here 2 years, and it's fantastic.
That's a fascinating story. What is the thing that you like the most about Barcelona?
Oh, come on, man. That's an impossible question. You know it. What do I like the most? I like the culture here. Mm-hmm. If I had to pick one thing, since you're forcing me to pick one thing, I like the culture here in Barcelona. It's, with staying away from the Catalan independence stuff, I like the Catalan culture. I like the Spanish culture. I like that this is an international city. Yes. It has people from all over the world. I like that I'm 2 hours from France. There's a nice kind of, you always hear French on the street all the time around here. And then over the years, this is an old city. People have been here. The Romans have been here, and et cetera. And so there's a tremendous amount of history and architecture and art and stories, and that's what I love. I love the culture.
What is the thing that you like the least?
What do I like the least? Airport strikes in the summer. It's pretty much been an annual thing. Look, it's super interesting, right? So you come from Europe, and I come from the U.S. And the U.S., every now and again there's a strike, but it's announced in advance, and there's no issue. I mean, it rarely happens to a point of disrupting anything. But in Europe, man, strikes, it's like rain. Is it gonna rain this week? Is there going to be a strike this week of somebody? And that's been a new learning for us. And the most annoying part and I get why people are striking, and I support that action, generally speaking. But I got to be honest with you, the Barcelona airport workers, whether it's security or whatever, they always strike in the summer. Right, because that's when you hit the city the hardest.
For sure.
And so it's become an annual thing, and it kind of sucks.
Yeah, strikes are pretty common in Southern Europe, and I usually say it's the national sport in some of those countries.
For sure, man. For sure.
As much as soccer. So speaking of soccer, do you actually follow soccer?
I'm not a fan. Like I don't have a team, and I don't care. But you can't live here and not be a Barca fan, or at least not pay attention to what's happening with Barca. I'll be honest with you. I've been to a few games, and it's amazing. 100,000 people screaming.
It is.
But I really want to go. I've not been to an Espanyol game. It's the other team here in Barcelona that probably no one's ever heard of. They've got a beautiful new stadium just kind of near the airport. And I've been up to Girona to see Girona play Real Madrid, which was super interesting because the Catalan spirit is very, very strong in Girona, and Real Madrid is the king's team, right? And so we went up there. It's a small stadium, and it was super fun. So yeah, it's totally fun. If you were to ask me who my team was, I don't know. I don't care.
What was your biggest screw up at work, and what did you learn from it?
I was just talking about this the other day to someone. I can't remember what it was. I had just become a consultant. I'd been working in-house for a while, and I'd just become a consultant, and I was going in to teach a 5-day workshop at this company in the U.S. It's a big, old, traditional retail company. And part of the process for me is to do some discovery work. And the discovery work means that I do some interviews and some retrospectives to understand what's working, what's not, look for the opportunities, look for the challenges, look for what's working well. And then I had to report back my findings to the leadership of the organization. And so I did my interviews, and I did my retros, and I wrote my report, and this was early on in my consulting days. And so I get on a call, and my client is on the call, his boss is on the call, some other managers and leaders, and I read my findings, the way that I heard them. And that organization had several big issues, and I didn't sugarcoat anything. I just kind of said it the way that I'd heard it, and I pointed out the problems and the challenges and what was broken and what could be fixed. And after I was done, the line was silent. They had all hit mute, and they were discussing between them. And then my client gets on, and he ends the call immediately, and he says, "Listen, I'm going to call you right back." And he calls me right back, and he chewed me out. He yelled at me. He laid into me in a way that, like, not since I was a child and my parents would yell at me, really, like, just, what are you doing? How could you say those things? You're making everybody look terrible. Nothing is that bad. The boss was on the call. Everybody thinks, like, what is she going to think? She thinks nobody knows how to do their job. On and on and on and on. Really just killed me, like, really. And look, deservedly so. I should have done a better job presenting my findings. Needless to say, the engagement was canceled shortly thereafter as well. But yeah, that was a very painful learning experience that I still have to this day.
Let's go back to that humility part of it, where, as a leader, you need to be humble and accept to learn and to take in feedback from other people around you.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Look, and then there's empathy there too, right? Mm-hmm. That's I think part of the thing that I was missing was empathy for the people on the call, right? They hired me to do the research. I did the research, and here's what I found. And I didn't even think I didn't think it through, right? What's the impact on these people if I just kind of lay it all out there? And I found out.
If you were to pick a different profession other than your own and what you've done in the past, what would it be?
Oh, man, I would go back to being a touring musician. I was a broke touring musician for about 7 or 8 years during college and after college. I played piano and I played in a few bands. And, look, I was young. Those were my best friends. I didn't need a lot of money. But I miss that. I really do. We had such a fun time, and I miss playing music with a band. I don't do it that much anymore. If I could, I would try to make a living playing music. That's what I would try.
Very nice. What type of music?
Today? Gosh. I think if I had a choice today, I would love to play funk and R&B. To me, that's the most fun.
Nice. What sound or noise do you love?
Well, that's relevant to our last. I love the sound of a Hammond B3 organ, a traditional Hammond B3 organ that's running through. I'm going to get a little technical here, but a Leslie cabinet. It's a spinning speaker. It's if you've ever heard an organ, a really thick, rich organ sound, it's going through that speaker, and I love that sound.
What sound or noise do you hate?
So Barcelona has these beautiful green parrots everywhere. They're little parrots. Like they're not big. They're a little bigger than a parakeet, and they're beautiful to look at. Really beautiful green birds flying around the city. But man, the noise that they make is just like you're in the park and there's 50 of them in a tree, and it's just cacophony. Like I hate them. I hate their sound.
What is your favorite word?
My favorite word, suboptimal.
That's
that one word.
That's quite unusual. And what do you mean by that?
I don't know. I like that word because it's a really nice and professional way to say not good or not good enough. And I use it. Sometimes I use it with my kids. Occasionally, I'll use it with my wife. Rarely, it's not a good one, but you could say it to a client, right? And so kind of coming back to the story of me just laying it out for the client, right? Instead of saying this is messed up, I could say your product delivery process is suboptimal, and here's why. I love that word. I use it all the time.
A lesson learned. What is your least favorite word?
Oh, that's easy, man. I hate it was two. I have two. It's a tie. So my least favorite word is moist. I hate that word. And the other word I hate is succulent. Oh, I'm grossed out just saying that. I don't know why, but like whenever I see that in a description for a menu item, they'll say like a succulent steak or something like that. I never order that thing because I can't. I just hate it.
What is the way for listeners to follow you on social media?
I'm super easy to find. I'm on Twitter, a JBoogie. Long story there, but that's where I am. And all of my stuff is now on my blog, on my website. I've consolidated everything at jeffgothelf.com. Blog, events, links to everything. So if you go to jeffgothelf.com, you'll find everything there. Okay,
and I'll share that on the podcast notes. Any last word of advice or wisdom for our listeners?
I think if you're working in any kind of product development position today, for the most part, it is a seller's market. So in other words, you're in high demand, designers, developers, product managers, whatever it is. And so if you work in an organization and you're not seeing the progress that you believe should come, they're resistant to change, they struggle with it, or they don't want to change, or whatever it is. Look, my recommendation is to start looking outside of that organization. There are tremendous opportunities out there everybody's hiring, again, product people, developers, designers, that kind of thing. And so there's probably a better gig out there for you. So don't get dejected, but definitely start looking beyond.
Jeff, thanks for being with us today. It's been a pleasure chatting with you, and maybe we'll see each other at some time soon in Barcelona. I'll make sure to ping you next time I'm there.
I look forward to that, Stefan. Thanks so much. This was really fun.
Thanks for tuning in to the EX Podcast. If you want to learn more, visit our website at expodcast.com. If you want to find out more about our next conferences, go to exsummit.com. Finally, you can also find my manifesto on business to employee or B2E branding at b2ebranding.co. See you next week.